Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking through my favourite reads of 2022. I've tried to do this in a little bit of a structured order, but obviously it's not completely worst to best, but there is a vague sense of reason to it. So yeah, let's get on with the books. So the first book I want to talk about is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I'm really ashamed I've not read this before. I tried earlier on in the year and honestly I didn't get on with it, and then I had to read it for uni and I just really enjoyed it. I'm not sure what it was. I'm not sure if it's because I was dissecting it. I'm not sure if it's because I was kind of analysing it that I really enjoyed it. But I think out of all the books I read on the module, this was probably my favourite. It definitely, some things in it have not aged well, don't get me wrong. Definitely read it critically. I don't think I need to go into the plot too much, essentially vampires, but yeah, no, it's definitely some things have not aged well, read critically, but overall, I really enjoyed it. I really like Mina Harker as a character, and there were just some really beautiful quotes that I just found myself highlighting, not for uni, I was just like, oh, love it. But it definitely is on the longer side, it's definitely on the slower side, so be in a classics mood if you want to check this one out. Okay, so the next book is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I really enjoyed this too. I got through this book so quickly. Dark academia, theatre students, Shakespeare. What more can I say? Friendship, murder, betrayal, loved it. I just thought it was so well put together. I think it really captured that kind of theatre student ego perfectly, and also the dynamics in theatre student groups. You know, I did quite a bit of drama as a teen, so I really appreciated it and I really enjoyed it, what can I say? Okay, so the next book on this list is Babel, or Babel, some people prefer to call it, by R.F. Kuang. So, I'm gonna be honest, for me this book was a little bit overhyped, but it still ended up being one of my favourite reads of the year. Definitely worth it. Really made me think about a lot of things. Again, dark academia, around translation students, big commentary around racism, and particularly around empire in academia as an institution and how it is used in empire and colonialism and all these kind of racist structures. I think R.F. Kuang did a really good job of dissecting a very complicated topic, and yeah, no, I did really enjoy it. And I've got my nice fancy Lee McRae edition too, which makes me really happy because I love her. I love her so much. The next book on this list is The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake. Another dark academia book. Surprise, surprise. I think we're noticing a bit of a trend here. I think I like dark academia. So The Atlas Six is another dark academia, but instead of being around kind of a special study, it's specifically around a secret magic society. 6 people are taken into this institution and they do research, but essentially at the end of the year, one of them gets kicked out. And the thing I loved about this, because I definitely think The Atlas Six is, you love it or you hate it. It's a very acquired taste. Some people hate this book and I fully understand why, but I just thought it captured the academic mentality of that competitiveness, that ego, just so perfectly. You know, I'm in university at the moment and I was just reading it and I was just like, this is a personal attack right now, you know? And that's something I've personally not experienced reading other dark academia books, which is why this one has a very kind of special place here. I've not read The Atlas Paradox yet. The series, I don't know where it's gonna go, so it could get better, it could get worse. But as of the first book, I loved it. So next up on my list we have Afterlove by Tanya Byrne, and this was another one that I just got through so quickly. I wasn't too sure at first, I wasn't too sure about the writing style, but once I got into it, this just had me feeling so many feels. Loved the romance. It's about a sapphic couple and one of them dies and becomes a Grim Reaper. And I just, yeah, I really loved it. One of my goals I think for next year is to read more sapphic books because, you know, diversify your reading, it is important, but loved it, highly recommend it. It made me feel a lot of feels, but in a very comforting way. It felt more like a hug rather than a punch to the gut, which is nice. But obviously I feel stuff like that is personal preference, so do check the trigger warnings before you read it, because obviously things surrounding death can be different for everyone. So next up on my list we have The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christina Lefteri. Oof. That's all I can say. This one really made me think and reflect. It had me crying. It was just so beautiful. It follows a refugee coming over from Syria with his wife. Lots of themes around family and loss and just having to just pick up and leave your whole world behind and just the trauma of it. And it was really beautiful, and the author herself has worked with refugees, so these are a lot of stories that she's heard firsthand. And I think with a lot of stuff going on in the world at the moment, it is a really important book to read. Again, very heavy hitting, check the trigger warnings because it is a lot, but beautiful novel. Okay, so the next book on my list is All That's Left in the World by Eric J. Brown. This was just such a... I had so much fun with this. It was kind of that perfect balance between fun and lighthearted, but with just enough tension to make it a very fast-paced read, but not a stressful read. Although it did have stressful moments, overall, this was quite, again, a comforting book for me. Definitely up there in my favourites. Basically, it follows two guys, Jamie and what was the other one's name? Andrew! Jamie and Andrew in a apocalypse after a thing called the super flu, and basically they meet and they are just trying to get by and survive in this essentially post-apocalyptic world. Again, the super flu does have some resemblances to COVID, so check the trigger warnings before going into it because it's still a very fresh wound for a lot of people, but overall, yeah, this was just nice. Not too deep, you know, if you're looking for some really complex apocalyptic novel to make you question the nature of humanity, this is not it, but it was a lot of fun, and it's gay, so again, win-win, right? Okay, so the next book on this list, which is, to be honest, the whole series, is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. And oh my, this series is just the biggest hug, or at least the start of it is. The first two I found were really fun, really comforting, still dealt with serious issues, lots of issues around, you know, being a teenager, lots of issues around coming out, but ultimately it was kind of around the third volume, and especially the fourth volume, where things started to get a lot heavier. And again, check the trigger warnings before you read, because while again it was comforting, it does deal with some very sensitive topics. But I love the characters. Nick and Charlie are just so wholesome. The side characters were amazing too. And again, it wasn't just a story about coming out and being gay, it just felt like a very authentic high school experience. And I really wish that I'd had something like that as a teenager, because it was just so... one of those things, you just look at it and you just see yourself in it. And it just makes you realise, like, you're not alone. It's very important for queer people to see themselves being happy. And Heartstopper does that, and it's beautiful. And if you haven't checked the TV series out already, I highly recommend it. That's also mwah. But yeah, both the comics and the TV show, 10 out of 10. Okay, so the next book on my list is A Psalm for the Wild-Built by Becky Chambers. Again, very cozy, comforting read. This book just came along at the perfect time for me. It is part of a duology. I've not read the second one yet. That's probably going to be some of my New Year reading. But essentially, there is a monk who has just got fed up with city life and he wants to move out to the countryside. And it is set in the future. It is like a cozy sci-fi. All of the robots essentially just decided they'd had enough and they just went out off into the wild. And while out in the country and in nature, this monk meets this robot and they just travel, they just go along together and they just talk and they just contemplate things. And it was just really nice, low stakes, no action, just nice bit of cozy fun, reflective read. It was a very reflective read, and there were so many quotes in this that just had me like, whew, you know? Loved it. And also, sorry, before I move on, it is literally like 140 odd pages. It's so short, it's worth it, it's worth your time. And last, but most definitely not least, and probably currently my favourite book at the moment, like ever, and that is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I had to read this for uni for a cognitive literature module, and oh my god, I'm so glad I did that module because it was beautiful to read. I loved reading it. I had no idea what was coming. All the twists and the turns were just I loved the vibes, because at the beginning it is very much, it's very vibey. If you're a very strong character plot driven reader, not for you. It is on the slower side, but again, it's not that long. You know, I loved reading it initially, and then after dissecting it and talking about it, I just love it even more. It's essentially about a man called Piranesi, and he lives inside this house. That's all I can say, really, because it is a really hard book to talk about without spoiling horrendously. And because I remember somebody last year, I think, talked about it in their reading wrap up at the end of the year, and the way they described it really shaped how I read it, and I don't want to do that. Maybe I've given away too much already, but shh. But yeah, that is my favourite reads of the year. I really hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble. I enjoy rambling, so, you know, that's win-win for both of us. And let me know what your favourite books were this year in the comments, because I'm always looking for recommendations and I would love to hear some from you guys. And I will see you all very, very, very soon, and yeah, Happy New Year, everyone.